So we had the pleasure to hear about the different practices within regions and hearing about the call for more integrative approaches, also involving the political level. And I know there might be a question about this at a later stage from the audience. We also heard about stakeholder engagement, stakeholder involvement, and opportunities to collaborate. So, in our next session, we will be diving a bit deeper into the services that selected regions and communities can expect from the P2R consortium. And as Thomas has outlined this morning, the RRJ is a very thorough and iterative process. And regions might really wonder how to do all of this. So, well, that's where we, as a consortium, come in. We are here to support you on this journey. So, related to the RRJ, we developed and are continuously refining and reworking the various services related to the enabling conditions to support selected regions and communities to define their resilience pathways and innovation agendas. And these pathways and innovation agendas are the outcome, finance and financial frameworks, one of the main means, and we will also hear about this, and capacities and capabilities, one of the main drivers and catalysts. So I would like to introduce on stage, I will introduce all of them at once, and then you come on stage, one after the other. Andrew Warren, who is a climate adaptation, resilience, and integrated planning expert at Deltares. He will be talking about the resilience pathways. Then we have Kit, who is a senior climate adaptation specialist with Paul Watkis Associates, and he is leading the development of P2R's adaptation investment cycle. And finally, Luca, who is an architect and who is also an expert in resilience and climate adaptation at ICLE Europe. He will introduce the capacity building support for enabling a resilient transformation. Andrew, it's your turn now. And please either log your questions on Slido or raise your hands or /and raise your hands after the three speakers.
Is this one working? Yep. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm really glad to be able to join you here this morning and explain a little bit about some of the support services we're going to offer to regions, and particularly focused on developing and formulating their climate resilient pathways and innovation agendas, which really are the core of the Pathways to Resilience project. I've got to skip through this, sorry. That's the introduction. There we go. All right, so while this is unlikely unfamiliar to the audience in the room and online, we already can appreciate that Europe is experiencing climate change, and extreme climate change. This is just a handful of the most extreme events that have impacted the continent in recent years, and we're all familiar with them. The floods in Germany, the droughts in southern Europe, the heat and the associated heat waves and public health impacts that they led to a couple of years ago, and then also the hellish wildfires that we're seeing increasingly more and more in places like Greece. So this is what we're seeing today. So we're already experiencing climate change. But what we also can appreciate is that these impacts are more than likely to get more intense and more frequent. So therefore, the risks of serious damage occurring within regions and regions having to confront that and deal with those losses are also going to increase. And we already know that many regions are struggling. So what we have is what we call an adaptation gap. Kit's going to talk a little bit more about that from a financing perspective, but there's also an adaptation planning gap. Now, we heard earlier today that reassuringly many regions are already doing a lot of work in terms of climate adaptation. But there's also many regions who could be doing more and and for whom the adaptation plans that they are presently developing could go further or could potentially be catalysed to be more transformative and more transformational. So how do we go about building resilience into our key community systems across the course of the project? It's pretty simple. There's basically 4 activities that we need to focus on, and these are the activities that we are going to be providing support via Pathways to Resilience. First of all, understanding the risks. Now, Efren spoke earlier this morning about some of the databases that are available at the European level for regional risk assessment, climate risk assessments. Via P2R, we're going to be harnessing that knowledge, but then also working together with regions to apply existing risk assessment information that they may have, more locally relevant risk assessment information that they may have, and then also linking in with other projects such as Climax to facilitate the use of more innovative tools to undertake more comprehensive risk assessments within regions. And the other thing that I'd like to point out about the future climate risks is they're uncertain. Okay? Yes, we think things are going to get worse. However, exactly how worse, we do not yet know. So therefore, that presents a planning conundrum. Okay? But a risk assessment can help unpack that planning conundrum. Looking at alternative scenarios of low and high climate change or anywhere in between, and basically providing that information to a region to make an informed decision about how to move forward. Once you understand your risks, then you also need to know about the options that you have available to you with which to adapt. In each of the key community systems, what options are available to protect you from future climate change risks? What adaptations are available to help you accommodate future climate change, for example? So things like nature-based solutions will certainly be coming to the fore, but also more governance and institutional related measures such as land use planning and so forth. Once we've got our options and we understand our risks, then we can start thinking about how we're going to sequence these options to formulate flexible and robust strategies in the form of pathways. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then another element of that is this, or an associated element of that, is to develop these innovation agendas. So these are the supporting activities that we need to put in place to help the pathways come to fruition and to keep on track. And once we've got our plans in place, then obviously we need to monitor the performance of the system and also our adaptations. Do we need to implement a new option? Do we need to change our plan because new information has come to light? All of these sorts of things. So the design of that monitoring system is a core element of the process as well. And those 4 activities are deeply embedded within the regional resilience journey. I'm not going to go into this slide into a terrible amount of detail. Thomas has spoken about has given an overview of the resilience journey earlier this morning. But primarily within this regional resilience journey, there are aspects of assessing the risks, establishing and finding out what your options are and selecting those, evaluating these, formulating them into pathways, and then setting up the monitoring framework and monitoring plan with which you can use to carry the plan forward and to monitor your progress into the future. I'm just going to talk a little bit about this concept of climate resilient pathways. Now, the concept of adaptation pathways has been around for about 10 years, and it's gaining further and further currency. And most recently, the IPC has now picked it up within Working Group 2 and has included it within this concept of climate resilient development pathways. Now, the key thing about a pathway is it recognises that adaptation is a path. Now, this may not be a controversial statement. Adaptation has always been a path. Our decision making has always been along a path. It's been a journey. But the key differences that are in this concept of climate resilience pathways is this idea of firstly anticipating the change. Okay, so instead of reacting to changes as they occur, waiting for disasters to happen, we anticipate these changes, and we do that through our risk assessments. Okay, planning and managing the uncertainty present within those, so that we can build resilience within our systems by the use of flexible and robust strategies. The other thing about a pathway is that it recognises that there's limits to adaptation. So if we make an adaptation today, that adaptation will not necessarily be fit for purpose in 50 years' time. We may need further adaptations. And what we will be trying to urge regions to do via Pathways to Resilience is to map out that decision timeline in the long term as conditions are expected to change, so that they understand and already plan and know what they will do as conditions potentially get worse. Okay? And there are decision moments throughout the alternative pathways you have available to you. And those decisions can either help you tend towards a more resilient path, which is in the top the top half of this figure, or they can be decisions that that are more maladaptive, if you will, creating lock-ins that tend you towards a more maladaptive part, where there's increased climate risks and your limits to adaptation are perhaps potentially reached sooner. So the idea, by mapping out these options, you can choose the more resilient path available to you. The second thing that we do within Pathways to Resilience, in addition to the pathways, is this supporting portfolio of innovation actions. And these actions are connected to the pathways in that they are expressly designed to help stimulate the transformations necessary to deliver those adaptations. Because some of those adaptations may also be transformational. They may transform the systems that we are used to living with, and as Alina mentioned this morning, change business as usual. Okay, so what sort of innovation actions are we thinking of? It's a wide, broad range, and it's not limited to what is on the screen. It's not limited to new technologies, although of course it can include those. It can be new ways of doing things within our regions, new cooperation between departments, between agencies, between organisations, new business models, new procurement practices, new operational procedures that allow for adaptive, flexible implementations. Okay, and of course also increased engagement with our citizens. So what does P2R offer within this frame? So primarily, the support that we will be offering to regions will come in the form of guidance, in the form of a toolbox, which has already been alluded to by Thomas in the RRJ. It will be online. And for every single one of those activities that I've already spoken about, of how we assess our risks, identify our options, formulate our pathways, and set up a monitoring framework, there will be tools and methods suggested tools and methods that can support the regions to deliver that. There will also be capacity development on how to apply those tools and how to apply these methods. And of course, then we aim to learn from the regions in a continuous process so that we can improve those methods and improve those tools and make them more relevant for regions, both within the mission, but then also more broadly. So specifically, types of methods and tools and the topics that we'll be focusing on in the guidance, in the capacity development, and also in the toolbox are things like a flexible decision-making framework to deliver multiple resilience dividends. As I've already mentioned, climate risk assessment tools, a catalogue of adaptation options per key community system, methods and tools for pathways formulation and evaluation, innovation agenda formulation, and then also how to design your action plan to make sure that these adaptation strategies that are formulated can be implemented. And then the regional dialogues are going to be the main mechanism by which we engage with a learning and reflection process within the project between ourselves and the regions, so that we can further improve the knowledge, the frameworks, and the methods that we propose. So that's all I'm going to say about how we are going to support regions to formulate their pathways and innovation agendas. And now I'm going to hand over to Kit, who's going to talk a little bit more about the support provided in terms of how we can finance these plans.
Thanks, Andy. Hi, everyone. Really lovely to be with you. So, as Andy says, my name's Kit England. I am a Senior Climate Adaptation Specialist at Paul Watkins Associates, and I'm helping, along with other colleagues, including the Athens University of Economics and Business, work on the financing aspects of Pathways to Resilience. So, just for context, we know that Europe has a large adaptation finance gap. The world has a large adaptation finance gap. But actually, we've started over the course of the last year to really understand how big it is in Europe. So we know last year from data from CDP that Europe, at the subnational level, subnational governments invested about 8 billion euros into adaptation. So this sort of includes all of the EU funds, but how they get channeled through the cities and through the regions as well. But some work on another project that we've done under Horizon Europe called the CREW has kind of generated some estimates of what do those needs look like for Europe. And it's more like, depending on your level of adaptation, it's between sort of 16 and 36 billion euros a year. So actually, in terms of the mismatch about how much money we need, we're spending maybe half. Maybe we need to double that. Maybe we need to increase it by fourfold. If we're really honest, none of those numbers are really true, but they give a sense of the scale of the challenge. So that's what we've got to try and do, and that's what we're going to try and do over the next 5 years, working with 100 regions. But we know that the reasons that money isn't flowing, some of those reasons are systemic and some of those are practical. So from a systemic point of view, there are lots of different barriers to the public sector in accessing finance and to the private sector, and some of those overlap. And actually, those really relate to the nature of climate change and the nature of adaptation and the nature of planning in regions, and actually how we run those processes, how we handle uncertainty, all those kinds of things. But we also know that the barriers get stronger and that there are more numbers of them, based on whether you are trying to do incremental planning about keeping things the same, or whether you're trying to do transformational adaptation. And transformational adaptation really is harder to fund, and it's much harder to get the private sector to pay for as well. But you also told us that there's practical reasons. So this data here, which if you squint, you might be able to see, but look at the slides afterwards, is from our expressions of interest process. And what it told us is that regions have lots of really practical challenges in accessing and drawing in funding. And I know I was in a region for about 10 years working on adaptation planning. And it comes down to people don't think that there's a good awareness. They're not aware about what the financing opportunities are. If they're aware what the financing opportunities are, they don't think that there are enough of them available. They might have challenges in actually just capacity to access those sources. But actually, there are some also really big challenges about making projects bankable. And by bankable, what we mean is that they meet the terms of whoever you're trying to get to pay for them. Or developing business models, new approaches to funding and implementing projects as well. And so what we're going to try and do over the next 5 years is address that in 3 ways. So the first, again, sorry for the text being a little bit small, but I'll talk to it and you can have a look afterwards. The first is around the subgrants process. So the subgrants process, yes, it's about adaptation planning, and yes, it's about giving regions resource. But actually, the whole point of the mission implementation overall is to use public funding to leverage more of it. So what we want to see after the sort of the working with the regions is that they think, okay, I've got this 210,000 euros. How do I use that to get 5 million? How do I use that to get a life grant? How do I use that to crowd in the European Investment Bank? How do we get the private sector companies to be doing more on adaptation? So that's the first thing. The second is around the program of support and training and capacity building. So we have an adaptation finance process called the investment cycle, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But what we really want to do is, as regions go through that investment cycle, as they plan their investments alongside their adaptation strategies, their climate resilience plans, we want to work with them and build their knowledge, their capabilities, their competencies, so that actually they can leverage more money and that they know how to do it themselves. And we're not just talking about quite a lot now. We talk about funding opportunities. So, where do we go? And the Covenant of Mayors directs you to, the traditional sources, the LIFE program, etc. What we want regions to move towards is being able to say, what's right for my context? What's right for this situation? Which actors, which sources should I be approaching? And then lastly, we're going to have a finance innovation lab. So while we're supporting all of the regions across Europe, and we're trying to work with the most vulnerable and those with the lowest capacity, we also want to work and develop new approaches, things that regions can take and adapt and leverage for their own contexts as well. And that will be forthcoming too. So our approach uses an adaptation investment cycle to support regions to go through that process. So this is aligned with a regional resilience journey, and it's a 6-step approach. I guess really it comes from a lot of the learning that's been happening both in practice and in academia over the last few years, that really the lack of finance is not about the money as much as it is about good policy. So good policy where you have a process to work out what money you need and who can pay for it. The right policy environment, support, subsidies, guarantees, etc., that can crowd in investment, and then capabilities to run programs, to run that kind of planning process and make it all happen. So the cycle generates an investment plan with that right policy environment and the capabilities to deliver as well. And it encourages regions to use what money they do have strategically. So it's not about paying for everything. It's about what are the right things for public money in a region to be paying for versus what are the right things that we ask the private sector to start to pay for, because we know that there is not enough money in the public's funds just to pay for all of this. And then, as you will see, when we start getting going with regions next year, we're going to be supporting that with detailed guidance, case studies, and resources as well, just like in all the other areas as well. And it's backed by lots of further support. So we're going to be doing some support that is available to all of our 100 regions, which is things like training in the planning, direct financial support through the call. We have a catalogue of sources and instruments of finance and their best practice examples. And we're going to be developing checklists and templates to run through the investment cycle. But then we're also going to move into a little bit more targeted support, working with a few regions in a bit more depth, and also our adaptation finance lab, as I've mentioned too. So hopefully that helps overcome a lot of these structural barriers. So it will increase public and private financing, it will engage a new community of stakeholders in financing, and develops the kind of region skills and knowledge and capabilities already aimed at bridging the finance gap. And I guess lastly, just to say, is we're really fortunate. I'm the one who's presenting today, but we have really, really good people from across Athens University, across Climate Kick and PWA, all designed to help regions as well. So we're really keen to talk to regions, we're really keen to engage with you, and hopefully that's a nice overview of the things that we're doing on finance. Thank you very much.
Slider.
No, wait.
You're going backwards.
Yeah, I can do. I can.
The green one? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Here it goes. Okay. Hi, everyone. So I think we have heard with the last two presentations a lot of topics, a lot of support that we want to give you. It can be a bit confusing. So also now what I want to do is try to put a bit of order also to explain with very easy words how we are going to deliver this. And basically, what we want to do is support the region, like building capacities to ensure that you can really pursue transformation. And this transformation must be resilient. So, of course, needs to take into consideration all these aspects that have been discussed today. At the same time, we want to keep some flexibility. We want to adjust our program according to the needs. We want it to be demand-based. And we want also to exchange with a lot of people, including experts, practitioners, local communities, etc. What is our aim is that we are creating knowledge together, so we are co-creating this knowledge, and co-creation is something we talk a lot about lately. But we want to do this because we want to have a higher impact than the 100 regions, so we want to disseminate also knowledge further. So I want to just explain how we are thinking of doing this, and basically what we want to do, what we aim to do is leveraging some key enabling conditions. What does it mean? It means creating in the regions that we will work with those conditions, working with those elements that can ensure that there is a enabling environment to make this transformation possible. And these enabling conditions, just to have a concrete example, are, for example, finance conditions. And this is what Kit has talked about. So basically what we want to do is relating these key enabling conditions with each of the steps of the resilient journey, and to make sure that we explain, like, step by step what should be done, what should be understood locally and regionally to really make this transformation possible. So I try to make a scheme. I hope it's quite easy to understand. But so the key enabling conditions will be our way to really interface with the regions. Really, we want to co-create and co-understand what the key enabling conditions are, talking with experts, talking with you, talking with main stakeholders locally and regionally, to really unpack these key enabling conditions with respect to the steps of the RRJ. How we will do this? Interacting with you with different activities that are here in the bottom of the image. And we will basically make sure that through this approach, you can embark on the RRJ, on this journey, and you can also basically work very concretely in your region or community to create this enabling condition to make the transformation possible. I'm repeating this a lot, but it's very key for our project. The final goal, which one is it? It's to basically co-define, if you want, the resilient pathways and innovation agendas that were presented by Andrew in the first presentation. So let's unpack this a bit. What do we offer? We offer, let's say, 4 or 5 type of activities. Workshops and seminars. So what are they? What is the difference? The seminar serves to introduce the different RRJ steps, basically, and to understand what is the context we need to move in. What are the steps that the regions and communities should take for being more resilient? The workshop will be more co-creative sessions. So basically our aim is to have participatory processes where we can look really in detail to the also key enabling condition, to the tools, to the methods that are out there to really enable this transformation. We will have innovation practice groups. These are like some groups that are led by the communities and the regions, of course, with the support for methodologies, for technical issues, and for leadership also by the Pathway to Resilience Project Consortium. And what we'll do is putting together different stakeholders, including, of course, experts from the international arena, but also experts from the ground, local and regional authorities, etc., to discuss what this will depend also on you. So we are keeping this quite flexible also to understand what is needed on the ground and to foster this collaboration. Talking of collaboration, we want also to ensure that the knowledge flows are enabled so that cross-regional collaboration is possible. And that's why we will create this peer-led mentoring program, which is aiming at putting on the same table, let's say virtual table, different regions and communities and discuss some specific topics. Of course, there will be mentors and mentees. There are regions from that have different capacities on different aspects. So we want to acknowledge this. We want to foster collaboration between these regions. And of course, this means also that one region that has more capacity on one specific topic could be then become a mentee on another topic. So this collaboration should go on both ways. Kit already talked about it. We will have also one-to-one support. This is serving basically up to, at least 9 regions and communities based on, of course, a needs-based demand. And what we will do is offering like very tailored support to these regions and communities to ensure that they can really create and formulate the pathways and the innovation agendas. I think this is a very important slide because it's important to understand who should be there. Of course, we want like that 1 or 2 people in each of the regions have ownership of the project, but at the same time, it's not enough only to engage 1 or 2 people in the regional local government. Through this project, we will tackle, as Andrew mentioned, different key community systems. What are the key community systems? Are basically different fields where we act upon to basically make this transformation possible, a reality. For example, nature-based solution, ecosystems, but also infrastructure, etc. So we need people that understand and work on these fields. We need all of them to be engaged. So beyond the climate change adaptation department, we also need people working on finance, we need people working on ecosystems, we need people working on health, on social aspects, etc. This is very important because we want to really leverage the key enabling conditions on the ground. Beyond these departments, of course, we will have also interaction with stakeholders. This means that we expect also you to interact with the private sector, with vulnerable communities, etc. NGOs, of course. Of course, this doesn't mean that all of these people have to be engaged in all activities that we organize and that you organize, but we want just to explain that different expertise are needed, and this should be reflected also on how coordination goes regionally. Finally, since I think this is the last presentation, some next steps. So, as I mentioned, we suggest that 1 or 2 people take ownership of this process, of the application process, first of all. so that they are identified in the municipality or in the region, and also that they start liaising with other colleagues to really co-develop and co-develop this application, and also foster this knowledge exchange to make sure that the information that is put there is the most accurate and valid. Of course, you have our contact there, so you can contact us at any moment if you have any questions. Of course, now with those of you that are here, we will be here for lunch, so also feel free to come and just ask questions in this moment. And, of course, apply by the 22nd of February 2024. This is very important. And that's it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Luca. Thank you, Kit. And thank you, Andrew. And I would like to invite you all on stage because we now have a bit of time for questions. And I would really like to invite an on-site question again so that I have time to look at the online questions that came in via Slido. So, yes, please. Yes? Would you sorry. No, I think it would be good also for the online participants.
There you go. Hi, thank you. I'm Stella Whitaker, and I'm the project coordinator for Climate Fit, which was mentioned on the last slide, and we're looking at territories and financial entities and the financing of adaptation initiatives as part of the mission projects. We just started, so we're little babes in the wood at the moment. I had a question to Kit, but also to the rest of the panel. I was going to ask it at the last session. In the whole process, in the investment planning process, are we going to be able to encourage the municipalities and the regions to develop as holistic as possible a view of the adaptation financing need for that territory, and to be explicit about the adaptation financing gap, and to be explicit about who those other parties that the municipalities want to take part in that process? And I ask that question because we've seen it as absolutely critical to getting other parties involved. It's like we're missing the first stage in the whole process. We've got to state the problem. But in stating the problem, and that was my question to the earlier ones, it's a political process. Territories have got to be brave enough and robust enough to basically state what that problem is and the magnitude of that problem, and the financing problem, and how is Pathways to Resilience going to tackle that? We are going to have that quite firmly as one of our key deliverables for the 20 territories that are in Climate Fit. So that would be useful.
I'll have a first stab, but I'm going to hand over to Andy and Luca as well a little bit. That's an evil question. That's a really, really hard question. But thank you for asking it, because it's also really important, right? I agree. I think if you're working in any other policy area, whether you're in a national government or a sub-national government, we have to acknowledge that the allocation of funding to anything is a political process as well as a technical one and a financial one. So I think that the aspiration is, in the investment planning process, that you work out what you need to pay for, and then you work out how you pay for it. And if you're doing public investment management or public financial management in any government, whether it's national or sub-national, that's the process that you have to go through. You have to work out what you need to pay for, when you need to pay for it, and how it stacks up versus other things, not just adaptation, but other economic or social programs, because there's only so much money to go around. And I guess where that kind of one of the challenges in that is in other areas, it's very clear what good adaptation looks like. And I think this is where I'm going to bring Andy in a little bit, is that, actually for a lot of the challenge comes around, we don't really have a very clear plan of what good adaptation looks like at a subnational level. And until you know that, for example, how many people are you trying to protect? What's the standard of protection that you're looking for? What's the value you're trying to create? Then it's very hard. In P2R, we're going to try and do that. We're going to encourage regions to set out what their investment needs are, how they're going to pay for it, and sequence it over time. But to do that really relies on having a good set of adaptation options and understanding of risks. And I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Andy.
I mean, you've pretty much said most of it, Kit. But what I would say is, like Kit's broken it down into two problems: working out what you need to adapt to, and then working out how you're going to pay for it. So the first, I'm just going to deal with the first question because Kit's, already pretty much well dealt with the second. Working out what you need to adapt to, that is absolutely critical, and I think that is where the ambition of Pathways to Resilience is really to move regions beyond this idea of incremental adaptation and more towards transformational adaptation. And the only way we can stimulate regions to do that and help regions along that journey is by including good, sound, scientific data and knowledge and information. And part of that comes from the risk assessment. So making sure that the risk assessment is not just looking 5 years into the future, not just looking 20 years into the future, but looking far off into the future. We need to be working out that if we are going to transform our societies, whether or not those transformationals are resilient and robust to potential future impacts. So that could be looking 100 years hence. It could be looking even further because we don't want to transform our systems in such a way that we then need to transform them again in 50 years' time. It's too hard. So the key thing within Pathways to Resilience, and this is where this idea of pathways thinking comes into it, is to really acknowledge those challenges early, set out what we're trying to achieve, build a vision around that, and really stimulate a region to move beyond incrementalism and towards transformation. And that's what we're going to try and do. I mean, yes, it's ambitious, and ultimately it will be down to the regions and the enthusiasm and the reception of these ideas within regions to do that. But that's what our ambition is, and that's what we're going to try and trying to achieve. Luca.
Just wanted to add something connected to it's very ambitious, and we are not gonna solve all the problem of the region. But again, why are we talking about key enabling conditions? We want, like, our discussions, our capacity building, all the training that we'll do. It's really focused to understand together with the regions what are those conditions that will enable the transformation. This doesn't mean that in the 18 months they will tackle all of them, that we will solve all the problems, but we want to identify at least what they should work on also beyond the Pathway to Resilience project. And of course, giving a methodology to really work on this. And that's why also, as was presented before by Thomas for the RRJ, we are detailing each of these steps, providing guidance, providing frameworks, providing other tools that can support, because we know that it's so overwhelming having so many tools everywhere and don't know where to access them. So our idea is to really direct those links related to that specific step of the framework so that the understanding of how and why to use that specific tool is more clear.
Thanks to all three of you. And I can imagine it is overwhelming for regions first. I have a question now that we solved the problem with the iPad. I have one question from the online participants. What can selected regions expect? Will they create their own process, or do they take part in a ready-made process and fill it with their content and topics? I would say this for you.
Yeah, I'll take this one. Or Thomas, do you want to take it? Yeah, it feeds into this idea of the regional resilience journey that is a process. But it is a flexible process. It is a generic process. It is not necessarily a process that can be carbon copy applied within every single region. Okay? Every single region will have its own planning processes, its own planning procedures, its own planning priorities, and so forth. What we will be aiming with the regional resilience journey is to provide regions with materials to elaborate their existing planning processes with activities that can help stimulate the transformation. Okay? So, yes, there will be a recipe. That is what the journey is. But what we would expect a region to do is to take that recipe and work out how to fit those pieces within its existing processes. We are not here to say, regions, throw out your processes, do what we tell you. Not going to work. So we aim to fit in with what regions need, but there are limits to how we can do that with 100 regions. So we offer a generic recipe that can be adapted.
Just to add on this, also regions and communities will not be left alone completely free in this process. Still we have this offer I have presented, and the thing is, we want to understand also with you, with the regions and communities, how to best organize this. And we want many of these activities to be demand-based and to be led by the communities. But this doesn't mean that we want to disappear. We will still be there, and we are not only giving this framework that you need to understand alone. We are thinking of different activities to best understand this framework together. So this is what I would say.
Very briefly, Kit.
Just very briefly, I think it's important to talk about some of the advantages of a common process. So I think the point about a common but tailored process is that you've got 99 other regions that you can talk to who are trying to do the same thing. But from an economics perspective and a finance perspective, it's also really attractive, right? Because one of the biggest problems is getting the private sector to come to the table and talk to us about adaptation. And a lot of that is harder in adaptation because on mitigation, a lot of the projects are replicable and scalable, and you can aggregate and bundle them, right? So it's very easy to say, what's the energy efficiency need in Europe? What's the financing need for building retrofit? And then to aggregate that and take it to investors. The thing that's really interesting about this commonality in Pathways to Resilience is if we've got 100 regions that say, we want to do climate resilience investment, that becomes of the scale and order that's really interesting to the private sector. So they're not going to, insurance firms are not going to come and talk to you about financing a €5 million, nature-based solutions project. If they're coming to talk about 100 of them, that's a very, very different prospect. So I think the point about the common investment planning is that we can take it to the private sector as well and broker some of those engagements as well, which I think is really important.
Thank you, all three, and thanks for the questions from the audience. I know we are a bit over time, and some of the online attendees might have left us already, so that I would like to wrap it up, and I would like to invite Efren on stage for some of his key takeaways from today. Please do keep it short.
As simple and easy as such. Okay, no, it's 2.5 hours, but a lot of things addressed in this time. I had like 4 takeaways or 4 key messages around the framework, the key conditions, the approach, and Pathways to Resilience, our initiative. So there is a decided climate action in Europe with a constellation of initiatives, projects, mechanisms being deployed. And in that framework, it's crucial to enhance those links between missions, specifically cities missions, adaptation mission, but not only, and to reinforce the cooperation among projects. Which is crucial. And that is the framework in which we are operating to reach an impact in increased climate resilience. There are key conditions related to multi-level action and governance, cross-border cooperation, networking, peer-to-peer, addressing the ecosystem of stakeholders at regional level, and that is crucial. The approach, transformational for addressing the complexity behind the climate challenge that we are addressing. I liked it a lot, the example of the fire or forest smart fire landscapes and that landscape approach, because that is the complexity. So demographic challenge, depopulation is also part of the complexity behind the climate challenge. In that respect, not only transformational approach, but also knowledge development, innovation is necessary in this framework. And what is P2R offering? A call, which is opening now, which will try to offer support to regions with less adaptive capacity, more vulnerability, but there is going to be a second round, and the maturity or having different types of maturity in the regions working in Pathways to Resilience will be important also for cross-fertilizing knowledge, for generating those mutual learnings with different types of maturity. So regions which could consider to be more advanced could be suggested to follow the process and perhaps candidate in the second round. A good amount of resources related to the regional maturity curve and the self-assessment, to the regional resilience journey, which is quite aligned with the regional adaptation support tool and is trying to incorporate this transformational approach to give more complexity and more impact to the regional strategies. Toolbox, including the pathway approach, the innovation agendas, finance, and of course the capacity building activities that Luca was presenting in order to generate that mutual learning and cross-fertilization. So, well, I don't know if it was too long, but
no, thanks. Thank you.
Less than that was impossible.
Thank you to all of you. And I would just like to add that this is the starting point of a movement within regions. And we are in this all together. And I would really like to encourage, and you mentioned this in your or throughout the day, to co-create, to collaborate, and to learn jointly to make the change happen that we so desperately need. Thank you all for joining us today. It was a pleasure moderating this event. And as I said in the very beginning, we recorded the session. We will make the presentations and also the recording available to you. We'll share this to all participants that registered via email, alongside a survey that we'll prepare, where you can also, again, give us feedback, log your questions, and we'll really try to answer them within the next couple of weeks in the FAQ section that you can find on our website.